What's up everyone, Jared here. So this is the LG G5. It's a pretty neat phone, and LG got me all excited with its modularity, but I've got a few things to say about that in a minute. So first let's talk about the design. Now apparently LG went with an all metal build this year, but I had a real hard time believing it's truly metal because it feels a lot like plastic. And guess what? Jerry Rig Everything, whose channel and video I'll link in the description below, carved away at the backing, and turns out it's just thin aluminum housing covered in plastic. So unfortunately, build quality isn't really on point here with the LG G5. And to address something I mentioned in my hands-on video, at the top and on the sides near the bottom, there's what I thought looked like flaking metallic paint, but what I found out is in fact antenna bands, so a lot of you were correct in thinking that. Anyways, I have to say it's comfortable as hell to hold, it really is, and it's got curves in all the right places. Now, something some folks will be happy to see is the continued existence of the IR blaster at the top, though some folks might not be too pleased with the relocation of the headphones port from the bottom to the top. On the bottom, however, we've got yet another phone with a bottom-facing speaker, and while it's super easy to cover up while holding in landscape, it does sound pretty darn good and can get really loud. I'm actually pretty impressed for a mono speaker located on the bottom. But next to that is the USB-C port, which I was pretty stoked to see. The back of the device sports a new fingerprint reader and power button combo, replacing the power/volume cluster we've seen from the past several generations. And now the volume button has been moved to the left side of the device. And all I can say about the fingerprint reader performance is that it's okay. Certainly not the fastest or the most accurate fingerprint reader I've tested, but certainly not the worst either. And I do like that, like the Nexus 6P, all you have to do is place your finger on it to unlock instead of having to actually press the button, which is kind of cool. And on the right side is the SIM card/micro SD card tray, which is apparently expandable up to 2 terabytes. So I've mentioned in many of my videos that I prefer AMOLED displays on my mobile devices, but man, the 5.3-inch Quad HD IPS LCD display on the G5 is gorgeous. Everything looks really crisp, colors are actually very accurate, and blacks are surprisingly deep for an LCD display. I'm impressed. So we're getting Android 6.0 Marshmallow right out the box, well 6.0.1 to be exact, with LG's new LG UX 5.0. It does look pretty similar to the previous version, but with a few new bells and whistles like Smart Doctor to help optimize your phone's performance and battery life, and the ability to easily reinstall recently uninstalled apps without having to jump into the Play Store, for example. Now, one of the big changes that a lot of people weren't too pleased with was the removal of the app drawer. But a lot of big tech sites and other reviewers haven't really mentioned that you can actually get it back by just jumping into the home screen settings and then selecting the home and app drawer option, though that option's been left out of my review unit. I can still get it back by selecting the easy home option if I wanted to. And with a new Snapdragon 820 CPU and 4 gigs of RAM having an orgy with Android Marshmallow, performance is snappy with no visible lag or stutters that I've experienced so far, though a few months of usage should tell a different story. And gaming performance has been great, with the back of the phone only heating up just a tad bit more than the Galaxy S7, but still hardly noticeable. Okay, now let's touch base on the modularity aspect of the G5. So okay, I think it's really cool and love that LG did something totally different than any other major OEM. But, and I know I'm gonna get torn apart in the comments for saying this, it's not really true modularity, is it? A good example of a truly modular phone is Google's forever in development project Ara, where you can swap out speakers, cameras, batteries, CPUs, RAM, and a few other things. With the G5, all we have so far is a point-and-shoot camera grip module that adds a few manual controls with an included internal battery to add to the existing battery, which is nice, and a DAC module that gives us hi-fi audio at 32 bits. That being said, yes, technically speaking, that's modularity, but I feel like it's cheating the actual spirit of modularity, if that makes any sense. But no matter how you look at it, it's still pretty neat and interesting. The performance from the removable 2800 mAh battery has been pretty decent, and I honestly can't complain with just over 6 hours of screen on time, which is pretty good when comparing the 6 to 7 hours of screen on time from the Galaxy S7's 3000 mAh battery. Now the camera cluster, which I like to call it, features a 16 megapixel camera and a cool 135-degree field of view wide angle 8 megapixel camera, which together I think steals the show for the G5 over the so-called modularity. So much like the Galaxy S7, you can launch into the camera app while it's locked by double pressing the volume down button, which is pretty dope. And you can also switch between both cameras by tapping a button in the app at the top. And there's also a couple different new modes like multi-view, which uses all 3 cameras, and you can switch around which box uses which camera as well. And then there's pop-out, which uses the 2 rear cameras to create a cool new look. The front-facing 8-megapixel camera does what it does, takes selfies, but it also has what I think is new to the G5, a new auto selfie mode, where it detects when you're in the frame, makes a noise, and then takes the shot automatically. So no holding up your hand or saying cheese to activate the shutter anymore. But at the moment, both cameras take underwhelming photos, and I know LG's 16-megapixel camera can take phenomenal photos from when I reviewed the G4 with its 16-megapixel camera, so it's got to be a software thing that'll get fixed when it's updated. Anyways, it really seemed to struggle with focusing. Highlights tended to get blown way out, and there just wasn't much, if any, dynamic range. However, for what it's worth, it actually took surprisingly good photos in low light. I took it to my local antique dealer whose store is like a dark cave, and the real world lighting in every photo you see here was way lower than in these pictures. So basically, LG just needs to send out a camera software update, and I think it'll be one of the best cameras in a phone on the market, even maybe rivaling Samsung's. And I think it's safe to say you can probably count on that update to come within the first month or 2. So I think with the G5, it's a great phone heading into somewhat uncharted territory on a couple fronts. And while it doesn't feel like a high-end phone using premium materials, it still feels great to hold. The addition of the wide-angle camera was awesome, and I found myself always taking 2 photos just in case I wanted a wide-angle version. But while the cameras wait for their software updates to make them incredible, everything else about the device is awesome, with a removable battery, great display, good speaker, expandable storage, decent battery life, and great all-around performance. The G5 is a winner in my books. But that should about do it for this one. I hope you liked the video. If you did, show me some love and tap that like button. And if you're new to my stuff, don't forget to subscribe for more, including my cinematic camera comparison video coming real soon. But thanks as always for watching, and I'll talk to you all in the next one. Cheers.